Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and StarCraft players of all ages. Welcome again to another episode of Inside the Champ, the post-game show where we mine for insights to make your StarCraft life better. I'm your host, Drekken, and we have today a special episode because I'm sure you guys are familiar normally on this show. What we do is we take replays and we deconstruct them and we talk about different topics to gain insights to figure out what's happening. But this time on this special episode, I have a guest, and we're going to be talking about improving mechanics in StarCraft. I'm joined by Fighting Frog. My guest and I are going to go over the idea and concept of improving your mechanics. Fighting Frog, you're a bit of a mystery, and that's fine. But as I already know, you spent 4 years focusing on how to learn things, and you sort of made connections with StarCraft and piano practice. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's been a big interest of mine. I think it's fascinating how the brain works.
And then, if I just make sure I understand this as well, that you originally was learning the core hotkeys, and then after you sort of made this sort of mental breakthrough, you've been able to get a handle of it, and now you've arrived at 6K MMR on the European playing random.
That's what made it interesting to me, because I thought it would be easy to learn the core, and it was a nightmare. And but yeah, I got through it eventually. Figured out the reason why it was so hard and how to get around it.
When you learned the core, you went from changing it from a little bit hard and transitioning it. What was a turning point for you?
I think it was the realization that I have to do things slowly from the start.
In your article, you put something really interesting. There was this Hebbian theory of neurons that fire together, wire together. Or other ways of people put it is fire and wire is a short way of thinking of it. How does that kind of relate to tasks performed in StarCraft?
I think that theory describes repetition very well, and there is a lot of repetition in StarCraft. We can play 1,000 games, and we can have different strategies, different maps. We can have unique games, but there will also be a lot of repetition. If you think about how many Marines you produced in those 1,000 games, that's a lot of Marines. So every time you perform a task, the way I see it is that is the fire.
Okay.
The neurons have to fire in order for you to do something.
Yep.
And as you do that, they will get used to what they just did, and the more times you do it, the more used to it you will become.
You mentioned in your article the idea of space repetition, or SRS, space repetition systems. How does that kind of apply to StarCraft?
For these repetitive tasks in StarCraft, they are usually very, very simple. So it's not that hard to learn one thing. You simply need to go into the single player game and just do that over and over. But the problem is that it can take a week to learn before you're used to it. And if you just spend 7 days looking at a single thing in StarCraft, that's a lot of wasted time. So spaced repetition, I think, is very important for spreading out the sessions, so that even if it takes a week to learn it, it takes a week for your brain to get used to it, for the connections to be made. The idea is that the longer you've known something, the less often you need to repeat it. So you repeat it often at the start when you just learned it, and then you increase the spacing.
How would someone apply that to StarCraft? The concept, because when I use it for language learning, it's obviously they show me a word and its meaning, and then they test me. If I get it right, it might come back a little bit later. If I get it wrong, it'll come back again really soon in the next 20 minutes, next 30 minutes. How do you do that for StarCraft?
You can use a program like that for StarCraft.
Oh, really?
You basically write down what you need to remember. So, for example, if you tend to forget to send back your worker scout at the correct time,
right,
and you have this bad habit, and you want to fix this habit, you simply make a card that says, just reminds you of this, and then you look at this every day. The first day, it's easy, of course. The second day, you will also get a reminder, and this reminder will be spaced increasingly.
Okay.
And these programs will also help you so that if you see a reminder which you haven't seen in like a month,
yeah,
and you know that you fixed this habit, you already do this now, you're good. Then you simply remove it. Whereas if you completely forgot about it, the program can help you to give you reminders every day again. So you can pretend it's just information, like a Japanese word, for example.
Okay. I didn't even think about it like that. That's interesting. What are the steps of breaking down, I guess, analyzing of mechanics?
Right. So we need to think about physically what you're doing, which buttons you're pressing, how you're moving the mouse. But you also need to think about what you need to think in that moment. So in order to build a refinery, that's a very simple task. You just need to remember the hotkeys for that, and then you're good to go. Some mechanical tasks are more complicated, such as controlling a 5-control group army, swapping between different units. That's much more intense when it comes to thinking.
Okay, here let's go into a demonstration right now. We'll take a step and we'll break it down. We're building, for example, building reactor.
Game resumed.
So right. So the first thing we need to do is figure out which steps are most efficient. We want to break this down in extreme detail. Exactly how is this done?
Right.
So this I wrote down in the guide, and my suggestion was first we have to select the factory, and then step 2, we build the reactor with the factory, and select somewhere to build it. Then we need to select the barracks in step 3, and in step 4 we have to lift this barracks. Step 5, land the barracks at the reactor, and finally, once the barracks has landed, we want to fix the rally point for the barracks.
And so the whole time is that a person might break these down into their in-game groups, but then I guess the next part would be breaking it down in its actual hotkeys as well, or the steps in the game.
Exactly. What does this mean? When do we need to press buttons quickly? When do we need to move the mouse? When do we need to think? Let's say we want more reactors.
Right.
So it's good to visualize this before you do it, so you don't mess up in the start. And also it's good. It helps with thinking, so you're doing it without thinking after you visualized it.
Yep.
So before you do anything, just visualize lifting the factory and then quickly landing and building a new reactor. We want to lift and then prepare to build a reactor next. Great. And then we want to select the factory, the barracks, and land on the factory. And then we're basically done, and we can start doing other things.
So if we're looking to improve that skill, what do we practice on? Do we practice doing that series over and over again?
Yes, exactly. And you need to be very observant. You need to think about which steps are slowing you down. Are you too slow at moving your fingers between the keys, or are you just doing one thing at a time? When you could be moving your mouse and preparing to press a key, maybe you're just moving the mouse, and then you try pressing the key after you finished moving the mouse. So there can be a lack of coordination.
Do you recommend taking these separate tasks, breaking them down like this?
I'm honestly not sure if I want to recommend doing this as a daily routine to improve mechanics.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure if there are better methods.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard of many at all. It probably works, but it's definitely required when you're making changes. If you want to start using camera locations, or if you want to swap inject method or things like that, then I think it's very good.
If you're learning something from scratch or something new, you would do something like this for that specific aspect that you're learning.
Right. I would definitely recommend it like that. But the thing is, you can also do it when you're comfortable with things to speed it up. That's definitely possible. I think the beauty of this method is that you can pretty much choose how fast you want to be at it, and then you practice slowly until you reach that speed.
You mentioned before talking about your fundamentals and getting the fundamentals right. How do you know when to switch? Like, how do you know when to stop doing it?
So you basically have to push yourself, and you have to focus really hard until you reach a speed that you're satisfied with. You can do it for weeks, but most tasks in StarCraft, as I said before, they're quite simple.
So I imagine you could just practice something to over-practice something to death.
That's why I think spaced repetition is so useful.
Dedicated practice. What does that mean to you?
It's trying to practice in the most efficient way, and usually this is very different from playing to win.
Really?
Or just playing for fun, or just playing relaxed. It's very rarely relaxed.
You mentioned a goal. So is that the difference between, say, playing to win and dedicated practice? Is that where you go in with a specific goal?
Well, with dedicated practice, your goal should usually be long-term improvement.
What's the priority of learning builds and practicing mechanics? Should you learn your mechanics first? Should you learn new builds? Like, how do these kind of fall into each other?
I think there's almost no connection between builds and mechanics. I think there's a strong connection between builds and strategy, because if you're performing builds properly, you're probably losing because of decisions that you make, or because of micro errors or positional errors, and you can fix this for your next games. But mechanically, I don't think builds are doing much for you. And builds also change with time. So if your focus is very long term, I wouldn't recommend looking at builds whatsoever.
I always feel that people mix up the two, that they feel they treat mechanics and builds very similar and almost not one and the same, but like interconnected. That if you're practicing your mechanics, you're also practicing your builds. Do you ever feel like that, or am I just making that up?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. That people they look at innovation and they hear people say, if you have really good mechanics, then you can macro like this. but I think it's so much more that good mechanics give you. Good mechanics give you the option to do this build and then do a different build the next game, and do a different build the next week. If you're just trying to learn a single build, that's doable with bad mechanics, and that's really hindering your mechanics, because you're not getting any variation in your mechanical practice.
So, how does one get mechanical variation then?
Well, you can break builds down into much smaller parts.
Okay.
Every single build is probably going to have reactors built. It's going to have cycling through your buildings to produce different units.
Oh, I see. So like core components of like each build.
Exactly. Core components of the game.
Oh, okay.
I think that's how I would define mechanics.
I want to first thank my guest so much, Fighting Frog, for coming out and doing this episode with me. It's really good to have you.
Thanks for having me.